This is Ken with Vioti. We're here at the MTA conference. Matt Polka with the ACA, the American Cable Association, just gave a very insightful talk on really the commonalities between independent telcos, independent cable operators.
Their identities as either cable companies or phone companies, and collectively we are fast becoming broadband companies that provide video, phone, and internet content to our customers. The question is, in 2010, what content do we provide, and maybe more pointedly, what content can we provide?
Some of the things you see, you mentioned a couple things, the Comcast-NBC merger, the retransmission consent, and over-the-top. So maybe you could talk a little bit about, first off, the importance of the NBC-Comcast merger.
Sure, happy to do so, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. Fact of the matter is that our companies today are not really cable companies or telephone companies, but what they are broadband companies that want to provide content over their broadband pipe. And the issue as it relates to Comcast and NBCU, as well as some other issues, is who's going to control that broadband pipe? Is it going to be our member companies as providers who control that internet broadband pipe, or is it going to be some media conglomerate in New York or Los Angeles that dictates what content's carried and on what terms and conditions? And that's why we at ACA are very, very concerned about the Comcast-NBCU merger, because we see a consolidation of content in cable programming, sports programming, online content, as well as other programming as well, broadcast programming, retransmission consent, access to local television. And it's important that Congress, the FCC and the Department of Justice impose restrictions and conditions on that merger to basically protect consumers in smaller markets, because if those conditions aren't imposed, then we may lose control of our broadband pipe, and that's not going to be good for any of our members.
Yeah, and it actually, from a consumer perspective, I mean, and you've already seen this, where the cost of service will rise for everyone in some of these over-the-top services potentially.
Yeah, it sure will. We're also concerned about price discrimination, because our members generally are forced to pay much higher prices for the same programming that's carried by the larger operators, and we don't think that's fair to begin with either. And so we're hopeful that the conditions will address that. But, the whole nature of over-the-top programming, access to programming, online is a new world. Where users today believe they can just about go anywhere for any content that they want, even if they have to pay for it, but they'll have access to it. No one will deny them access. We're worried about some of the conglomerates, particularly ESPN 360, which is an internet broadband service that basically only provides access to only some consumers. And the consumers that have access are consumers whose cable operator actually has a wholesale deal to provide it, but that's the only way you can carry it. So if you're not a subscriber of a cable company that has a deal, you can't get access to your favorite game because ESPN prohibits it. That we see as a problem, because it's essentially taking the same kinds of programming, tying and bundling models that we see on cable today and moving them over to online, which will only increase content cost and make broadband less affordable to consumers, and we don't want to see that to happen.
Yeah, and the counter is for the person who doesn't want to see the programming, they're still paying for it.
Absolutely. A lot of people. The fact of the matter is that people do like sports. Sports programming is must-have. But the fact of the matter is that most people are casual sports enthusiasts. A lot of people don't even care about sports, would never watch sports. These kinds of deals that I'm talking about would force every person to pay for it, whether they want to watch it or not. Whether they never go to it or not, they're paying for it as part of their access to broadband, and that's wrong.
Yeah, and more importantly, if you raise the cost of broadband, then other things that I'd say are more useful, like being able to have access to the knowledge of the internet, sure. It becomes more costly for those who can least afford it.
And then where do you stop? I mean, today it may be ESPN 360, but tomorrow it may be Google. Tomorrow it may be Yahoo or Amazon that creates the same kinds of barriers. I mean, at the FCC today, Chairman Janikowski is pushing forward a rulemaking that would prohibit independent internet service providers like our members from discriminating, meaning we can't prevent any of our customers access to any content that they want to go to. But they don't say anything about the content providers discriminating. And we don't think that's right, and we don't think that's fair, and we think that both sides of the equation would need to be addressed.
Yeah, and you were kind of implying in your talk, really kind of what the internet allows is kind of this a la carte model,
right.
and this is kind of counter to that.
Yeah, this is definitely counter to it. And no, I'm not saying that cable operators or video providers shouldn't have the opportunity necessarily to enter into a deal, but a subscriber that wants to have direct access should have direct access whether the cable operator has a deal or not. Plain and simple. And that's the fundamental difference between cable and between the internet, where today it's a user-generated choice on the internet compared to cable, which is a much more finite number of channels. And we don't want to see content choices restricted to consumers who are now basically used to going pretty much wherever they want, no matter where they would like to go.
Well, and it kind of harkens back to the idea of free TV, and we all used to get it over the air. And about 17 years ago, there were rules put in place, 17, 18 years ago, that kind of changed that, the retransmission consent. Sure. And you brought up a very interesting point, an unintended consequence of regulation, and that is that it actually caused media consolidation.
Absolutely, yeah. What happened when the retransmission consent rules were instituted in 1992 is that the broadcasters, and particularly the networks, that were developing cable programming realized that, hey, we have a monopoly market here. Essentially, our broadcast station has a monopoly where no cable operator can carry any other signal but my signal in that marketplace. So in terms of what we negotiate for retransmission consent, why don't we make them, in return for the right to carry the signal, maybe carry our affiliated programming content? So you saw deal after deal after deal where affiliated programming content was tied to retransmission consent and then basically forced onto cable, where people are receiving the service whether they watch it or not. They're paying for it. Okay, that's just continued, and it's basically encouraged these big media companies to even get bigger. So now a retransmission consent rule that was passed in 1992 to help what were smaller broadcasters is totally out of line today in 2010, where basically broadcasters are huge media conglomerates that have enormous leverage over smaller providers, which are our members. So the thing has totally come full circle. It really has provided now an unintended consequence that's not only harming our members, but more importantly, their customers who have to pay for it. Correct.
Well, Matt, I appreciate your time. I appreciate the concept of the commonality between the independent telcos and the independent cable operators. And you have an upcoming conference, legislative conference. Do you want to
end on that? 17th Annual ACA Summit. What's interesting, too, about ACA is while we have 900 members, 40% of those members are traditional telephone-based companies. So they started out as telephone companies and now provide video. So we know the independent telephone sector very, very well and are privileged to have many companies as our members. Our 17th Annual Summit, April 19th to 21st in Washington, D.C. We expect 300 of our members to come join us, where we're going to go up on Capitol Hill. We're going to meet our congressmen. We're going to meet our senators. We're going to tell our independent video story to make sure that we're heard and to make sure that they hear our stories going forward. So we're looking forward to it.
Excellent. Well, good luck at that event.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you.